The penny dropped, I think, for a lot of us probably about 2.5, 3 years ago when we started seeing stablecoins and seeing that they were a real solution to a problem. I think stablecoins are well beyond product market fit.
David Rolf is the head of Visa Ventures, and he explains how Visa is funding the next wave of global financial infrastructure and how the world's largest payment network operates at the speed of software.
From what we understand, we have about 70 to 90% of the stablecoin-backed credit card and debit card volume out there is on our network. I think overall there just needs to be more understanding that like stablecoin is not for like crazy degen DeFi people, right? That it solves real problems. If I'm a builder in this room, like how could I engage with Visa? Like how could Visa help me build my business, given the networks and the scale and the relationship and the literally billions of credentials that are out there?
Catch the full strategy on B2B settlement, surviving regulatory compliance, and partnering with the legacy giants with Drew Rogers and David Rolf, only on Stable Dash.
The city by the Golden Gate. Truly the city of many wonders.
David, thanks for making time to hang out with us here at a very stable conference, San Francisco. The room is buzzing. You just were on stage moderating. Who were you moderating on stage?
Sure. So I was moderating a conversation between Farouk from Rain and Malcolm from Western Union. And
Awesome.
so they announced a partnership essentially with Visa to enable money that is sent via Western Union to recipients who can then have that money essentially paid out, not just in cash, but essentially on a Visa card that is backed by a stablecoin that's issued by Western Union.
So cool.
So, I think it has a lot of impact for people who might otherwise just have to go into cash, essentially be able to keep money in digital economy. They can keep money in stablecoins if they want. So yeah, it was a fun conversation.
Yeah, there's so much energy today in this part of the world where the Visa office is a couple drivers away from here.
I'm not wrong.
Visa has been, this is actually, we met with Kai when we had a podcast season with Rain, Farouk and Kai and myself, we had a chat. It's been really cool to see Visa's involvement in this conversation and continue to see not just how Visa is innovating internally on the product side, but also what you're overseeing on the venture side. Maybe give us, as we kick off here, just like the lay of the land with your role and your mandate at the firm and how you think about the builders and founders around things like stablecoins, diving into the current state of like the founder climate, teams that are, gaps that might exist. But let's start with like where you sit within the very tiny organization that you work at.
Sure. So yeah, I've been at Visa 8+ years and have had the privilege of leading the venture team for the last 3.5. So we're not a venture fund, right? We want to and expect to make very good financial returns, but that's not our primary goal, right? We're employees of Visa Inc. and we report up to our Chief Product and Strategy Officer, Jack Forrestal. So we're very aligned on strategy. And really our mandate is to find the winning companies of the future in spaces that are extremely important to Visa. Some of those are current commercial partners. Some of those are not. And many of those increasingly are companies that are active in spaces that we say, gosh, this is really important to Visa for Visa to be involved in. And, we have one ventures team that covers literally global investments. So more than half our portfolio is outside North America. And stablecoins is one of the areas of focus for us just because there is so much dynamism. There are so many founders solving real problems with the technology, right? And I think for us, that's the stage where we get incredibly excited and interested when we see a technology wave come that is solving real problems. And I think stablecoins are well beyond product market fit at the same time as people are still figuring out what else they can do. And so we've been spending time here the last 2 years, really trying to understand the space, talking to a lot of folks. We have made a few investments, but really we're focused on what can we learn? How can we help these companies? How can we connect them into other places inside Visa? How can we connect them to other venture investors who might be suitable for them? It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so much fun. Question on this. So this moment with stablecoins and what makes them actually what you're describing as like real problem solving utility for the world, strategically important to Visa's business. You said it's been about 3 years that you've been leading this. What's been your personal journey in that 3-year period with things like stablecoins? Like when did stablecoins start to really become strategically a strategic imperative for you? how would you compare how you see them now versus 3 years ago? What's the kind of evolution for you as David like?
Sure. So my evolution as David, I mean, as Visa, we've had a crypto team for a long while, and we've had, there have been lots of waves of crypto-backed cards, right? Credit cards, debit cards, et cetera. And so we were involved in that back from the first ones. Those weren't really investment opportunities for us. The penny dropped, I think, for a lot of us, probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, when we started seeing stablecoins and seeing that they were a real solution to a problem for things that, frankly, as Visa, we're involved in. We know about money movement. How do you accelerate the flow of funds? And so for me personally, there was just a lot of learning, a lot of meeting with people, trying to understand this, and then also figure out, as Visa, where can we help, right? Where can we be involved? What can we do? And so if I sort of fast forward to some of the product things that we've subsequently launched, be that the ability to settle in stable coins, right? So that means 24/7 settlement, which means maybe that transaction that would have settled Friday at 8 p.m., now I get settled Friday at 9 p.m. instead of having to wait until Monday, right? So accelerating the flow of money, which matters to us, matters to our partners, right? So settling in stablecoins is one thing. We've also used, we're not just partners and investors, but we use this, right? So we accept settlement in USDC, for example, to pre-fund cross-border money movement that we do through our Visa Direct network. And of course, there's all the stablecoin-backed payments, right? So stablecoin-backed Visa cards, debit, credit cards. From what we understand, we have about 70, 90% of the stablecoin-backed credit card and debit card volume out there is on our network. So it's been a journey of a lot of learning, a lot of time talking to folks, and then also trying to connect a lot of dots in what teams to be involved. We've got terrific product and sales and like business development people who are always working with all these partners. And so it's just fun to sort of onboard and connect them in.
So cards, companies like Rain, we've loved getting to know teams like that, the role that they play with Visa, and bringing both of these things together with stablecoin settlement is so beautiful. And it's so, for a lot of the people in the room who are building the infrastructure, the assets, like Visa and a company like Rain together, for example, are just so amazing to actually bring and drive and accelerate volumes. What are maybe alternatively in your mind, some gaps that still exist, or problems or pains or opportunities generally that you see the market still needing to solve for? Or when you're going back to the team and you're thinking like, hey, strategically, this area seems like almost like a call for founders or builders, or things you wish you saw more of. What does that feel like right now?
So I'll answer a couple of ways. One, I think overall there just needs to be more understanding that like stablecoin is not for like, crazy, degen DeFi people, right? That it solves real problems. And I think that, what we were talking about with Rain and Western Union, like the recipients of these are not people who are like crypto natives at all. That it's a use of a technology to solve a problem. If I think about some of the things that still remain, on-ramps and off-ramps, like local country liquidity for the conversion, let's say. So, if you think about stablecoin sandwich, right, if it's getting off-ramped into a local currency, a lot of countries just don't have the kind of liquidity in their currency. So I know that there's a lot of folks who are working on trying to source liquidity. So that's one thing that I think will help with adoption. The fundamental technology itself is great. I think there's more around adoption. And then, there's some complexity, right? Like, there are different chains that you can send stable coins on. And so some way to sort of manage or track that, make sure that you're sending money to a wallet address on the right chain. And folks are working on this, but it's still a little bit some of the blocking and tackling. There's some fat finger error potential that they would love to see taken out of the system. I think those are some of the main ones. And then, the other one I would flag is there's an opportunity to sort of tie in a lot of the information that flows along with payments, right? So stablecoins are a way of moving money. There's a lot of information that goes along that. I think there's a huge opportunity in business-to-business payments, for example, where stablecoins could play, but there's a lot of maturation that's needed and just sort of stuff to be built out and connections into payments, like accounts payable, accounts receivable stuff, which I know folks are working on, but if I think of like what might be a step change, those are a couple of interesting areas.
Yeah. Some people describe Visa, I don't know if you agree with this or think of it this way, but some describe it as a messaging protocol or network of like transferring information around. And some of that is like, there's so much to what the Visa network is and different parts of the Visa business that really is in the business of transferring messages and information and making sure that everyone's on the same page and that the state is settled and things. What sort of things do you imagine being valuable that would be attached to a stablecoin flow that Visa maybe historically really cares about? Like, are you thinking about payer information, geography? Like, what's top of mind when you say that, things that would be insightful to be associated with a stablecoin payment? What would that be?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was giving some example of that, and I mean, I agree with you to say I think that's part of what Visa does, right? I mean, we're moving a lot of money practically, as well as the information that goes alongside it, but between partner banks. Yes, I think there's a lot of information, or there's potentially information to include alongside the money movement. I think there's also, there are things that you get with stable coins, but there are also things that you lose, right? Like I think, some people say like, hey, is this going to be what everybody buys stuff with? And you may indeed, right? But like there's downsides to cash, there's downsides to check payments, right? Once the money's gone, it's gone, you send a wire. So I think there's a lot. I think it's a phenomenal way to move money. It is not always the cheapest. It is sort of moves at the speed of software, which is terrific. I think there's a huge opportunity to build in more programmability to it, right? So it's one of the benefits is it's on chain, and as you tie it into other systems where you could have like automated liquidation if things happen, I think sort of having on chain money like that. And again, I know there are a lot of people who are working on that. That gets interesting. But what I was saying before is more in a B2B case of attaching information along with the payment, which again, it's software, but like it needs to be coded and built.
What sort of B2B use cases do you think, like when you imagine the ideal today, like with what exists right now for B2B, what sort of use cases do you find most like gaining the most traction that might be using Rails like this? Like, are these like mostly payout use cases, treasury management? What are the B2B flows that you guys are seeing that is really moving the needle right now on the Visa side, or just flows?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit early to say on that. I mean, again, there are people that are trying it, right? You have companies that are using stablecoins as a rail for payouts. Geographically distributed companies, right? And so you've got folks that are doing that. I was talked to somebody who was saying like if you work for a globally distributed stablecoin company and you're not being paid in stablecoins, like something's wrong, right? So I think that's sort of where the early adopters are on this. I think for that really to become mainstream, that there's going to be a lot of plumbing, a lot of infrastructure work, a lot of compliance stuff done. I think the compliance piece in each of these countries, again, if you're looking at it for cross border, which I think is the leading use case, right? Like payouts, money movement, cross border. The part where it goes into or out of fiat is incredibly important, and you need to be locally regulated there. So yeah, it's still early. We're excited about all the use cases that people are trying and exploring. We got folks inside Visa who are thinking about each of these every day. So it's fun to sort of connect them in.
It's such a fun room. It's a fun room to be in. I feel like what would be, as we close here, just, you have a room full of stablecoin builders. I think our audience is very deep and a lot of industry native folks, people who are building, founders, infrastructure, investors. Like a lot of this room is kind of reflective of who might be listening to this. What would be your message to them? What's the thing that you would hope that they know about your team, about what Visa believes right now about stablecoins? Like, what would be that core thing that you hope that this room knows about Visa or Visa Ventures specifically going into the rest of the year?
Yeah, no, and it's, I mean, the energy here is incredible. I was just upstairs and that room was filled, and we've got people outside, and it's a beautiful day in San Francisco. So no complaints. Look, but what I would say is important to understand about Visa is we are enablers, right? We are a network. We look where we can be helpful by leveraging the assets that we've built over time in order to help businesses succeed. And so that is true of large companies. That is true of startups. There's lots of different sort of points of contact into Visa, but we've got thousands of people who wake up every day basically saying, hey, how can we take the things that we have built as a company? How can we use those for the benefit of our partners? And so really to think about it like, hey, if I'm a builder in this room, like how could I engage with Visa? Like how could Visa help me build my business, given the networks and the scale and the relationships and the hundreds of millions of endpoints, right? And the literally billions of credentials that are out there. Like I encourage people to say like, hey, how could Visa help me? And then, find somebody and reach out, and sort of come in. But I'll I have a lot of conversations with companies. That's always a question to ask. Like, what do you want from Visa? Like, how could Visa be helpful to you? And so really to think through that, because we've got lots of assets. We're global. We have all this, and we're looking really to partner with companies where we can help them be successful.
Well, it's incredible. I'm happy that you're in the room. I'm happy that you're supporting the space, and really thankful for your time. We'll do it again.
Oh, thanks. I really enjoyed this.
Awesome.
Have a great time.
That was our exclusive conversation with David Rolf from Visa.
The city by the Golden Gate. Truly the city of many wonders.